Hi friends, today let's dive into the new Hunger Games book. On June 17th, 2019, Scholastic Publishers announced that a new book set in the Hunger Games universe was coming. This was a huge announcement as the books from the main trilogy had existed for 10 years without any new information coming out. Though speculations of a new book had existed for years, nothing had ever been confirmed. However, when this book was announced, the fandom went into a whirlwind with theories and ideas coming out all over the place. I myself made a prediction video of what I thought this new book might be about, and you guys should definitely go check out that video if you haven't already. Today I want to talk about the new information that was just released on Friday. The title and the cover of this new book were announced. Obviously we're going to break it all down as much as possible. The title of this book is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is actually a very interesting title, especially if you break it down. A ballad is a story of epic proportions often told in song form. A very well-known ballad is the Iliad, for example. When people sing, it's often a sign of feeling calm, relaxed, and happy. And we know from the initial trilogy that a very important and prominent songbird is the mockingjay. This was an animal that was never supposed to exist. The Capitol had created a mutation called the jabberjay. A jabberjay was able to memorize and then completely recite an entire human conversation.
It's just a jabberjay, it's not her!
How do you think they got that sound? Jabberjay's copy.
This means that they would be sent out towards wherever rebels were, and then they'd bring back whatever was being said to the Capitol. Obviously, after a while, the rebels realized this is what was happening, and so they'd have fake conversations. This means that fake information was being relayed back to the Capitol. When the officials of the Capitol realized this is what was happening, they decided to stop using jabberjays. And instead of just killing all of the jabberjays, they just released them into the wild. This was with the thought that an animal that was created in a lab would never survive in the wild. However, they did, and they actually mated with mockingbirds. This created the mockingjay. It was no longer able to mimic human conversations, but it could mimic songs.
Here, watch this. Ah. Mockingjays.
The mockingjay later became a symbol of the rebellion and is the emblem that Katniss used in her fight against President Snow. For the other part of this title, there's the word snakes. Snakes are often used as a symbol of being cunning, untrustworthy, and overall dangerous. Katniss often compares President Snow to a snake throughout the trilogy. Obviously, the snake title here likely doesn't refer to President Snow. He would only be a child when this new book is set, so it's unlikely that he plays a major role in the story. But the snake may refer to another dangerous and cunning evil that can't be trusted. Snakes and songbirds are natural enemies. Both animals can and do attack each other and will often kill each other. This tells us that this epic story revolves around this natural instinct to fight. There's the rebellious side represented by the songbird and the cunning, dangerous side represented by the snake, and they're in a fight, potentially to the death. The fact that this is a ballad and one of the two main characters is a songbird makes me think that the book is going to be in the point of view of the songbird, much like how the initial trilogy is in Katniss's point of view as she fights the Capitol. It could also be a sign that the songbirds, i.e. the rebels, are communicating together because they would sing to each other. A lot of fans have already noted that this title really resembles A Song of Ice and Fire. This is the name of the book series written by George R.R. Martin, commonly known as the Game of Thrones series. This is a 7-book series, of which 2 books are still yet to come. The resemblance of these 2 titles could be a sign that Suzanne Collins is going to try and replicate the epic fantasy-style storytelling. We also now know that this book is going to be about 624 pages long. This is considerably longer than the 3 books in the initial trilogy. The Hunger Games book is 454 pages long, Catching Fire is 472 pages, and Mockingjay is 438 pages. Now for the cover. The background of the cover is mainly dark green with a black center and black circles coming out of it. Green is a color that's often associated with radioactive materials or nuclear materials, so is the idea of expanding circles. It's also a color that's strongly associated with nature. This could tell us that this story is going to take place in a world with less human interference in it. Black is most commonly associated with death. The two colours almost seem like they're fighting for attention to see which of the two can cover the entire plane. Comparing the two colours to the two animals tells us another side of this. Snakes are often green in colour, whereas mockingjays are mainly black.
It's a bird. It's like a. Oh, it's got feathers. It's like a bird. It's like a
Like a mockingjay.
Again, these two colours represent the opposition between the two animals. The branch the animals are sat on is almost a full circle. The fact that it's not complete yet shows that the new way of life, the new world order, hasn't been fully accepted. Not only is it not fully accepted, it's actually not fully complete. The world is still growing and shaping itself over time. There are a few other branches growing out of this main circular branch. These represent the other ways the world could end up. There's other options and other paths to take. It's pretty obvious to see that the branch is dead. There's no leaves or flowers on it. This tells us there's no hope for renewal, there's no happiness, there's no new life coming out of this. We do, however, see that this branch has thorns on it, much like the branch of a rose bush would have. Obviously, the roses call back again to President Snow, who absolutely adored roses.
That's a nice one. The colors are lovely, of course. But nothing says perfection like white.
However, the thorns represent a huge danger for both animals involved. Both the bird and the snake could prick themselves on the thorn, they could get injured, they could bleed, and they could potentially die. This new world isn't actually helpful to anybody involved in it. Interestingly, the branch obviously is made of wood. Wood is an amazing source of kindling for a fire. We know that the rebellion that successfully overthrows Panem is led by the girl on fire. The bird on the cover is very obviously a mockingjay, especially if you compare it to the other three covers we already know. As I mentioned earlier, the mockingjay is a symbol of rebellion, but more importantly, of resilience. The bird on this cover looks happy, it even looks like it's singing. It obviously still has some hope, some light in its heart, some source of joy and happiness. It's also blatantly obvious that this bird is not worried about the snake right next to it, even though the snake could kill it in a second. This shows that though the animals are natural enemies, they have learned to coexist in some kind of peace and harmony. Well, they're not actually coexisting that well, they are sitting on different branches. Not only does this mean they are physically further apart from each other, but they're probably on different mindsets. Whereas the snake wants one world order to happen, the bird is aiming for another one.
We promise never to give up, never to give in until we have made a new Panem.
The bird is looking up and away from the snake. In literature, looking up is often a sign of hope and waiting for better things to come. As for the snake, it's looking down, which is often associated with feelings of anger or hatred. It's also looking in the absolute opposite direction as the bird, which shows that though they're living in peace, they're not actually living together. They're looking in opposite directions, they're sitting on different branches, they're completely avoiding each other. The snake also has a definite, ominous look in its eyes. It's also tasting the air around it. Now, snakes do this when they're hunting for food, but also when they're trying to ascertain what's happening around them. This could tell us that the snake is wary of their environment and they're trying to figure out what's going on. When you compare this cover to the three initial books we already know, a lot of smaller things jump out. I'm going to use the covers of the most common edition of these books, as these are the covers that Suzanne Collins had in mind when writing them. In the later books, so the initial trilogy that starts in the 74th Hunger Games, the ring around the Mockingjay is made of solid gold. This is in stark contrast to the thin, flimsy wooden branch. The branch could easily be broken, whereas the ring can't be changed without using an immense amount of brute force. The ring, in this case representing the capital, or at least the New World Order, is now set in its ways. Gold is also cold and relatively unnatural when compared to a branch. This New World Order, the new way the world works, isn't natural. Obviously, a lot of fans have pointed out, and I even said it early on, the Mockingjay appears on all 4 covers. On the prequel, it's happy, sitting on a branch, potentially singing. However, on the cover of The Hunger Games, it's in mid-flight and it's holding an arrow in its beak. It's starting to fly away, and it's ready to fight its way out if it has to. By the time we get to Catching Fire, this bird is actively fighting and has a clear trajectory in mind. And on the cover of Mockingjay, the last book, the bird has freed itself from the ring and is able to finally spread its wings fully. Obviously, the 3 main books use the Mockingjay to represent Katniss.
I've decided I'll be your Mockingjay.
But it's not just Katniss, it's also all of the rebels and all of the population that's stuck under the Capitol's control.
Katniss Everdeen has consented to be the face of our cause, to help unite the districts against the Capitol.
So this happy singing Mockingjay on the prequel represents the population of Panem. They're currently unaware, or at least avoiding their reality, that they're stuck in a system that doesn't suit them next to something that can kill them at any point.
I mean, if we just wanted to intimidate the districts, why not round up 24 of them at random and execute them all at once?
Not just in this edition, but in most editions of The Hunger Games, the 3 main books have a solid background colour. This is different to the prequel, where there's 2 colours fighting for attention. This difference could be something very simple, like that's just how the books look. But it could also be that one solid colour represents one world order. The Capitol reigns, no one else does. So what does this title and cover tell us about the story of this new book? Well, as I've mentioned earlier, this new story will likely revolve around the difference between the rebels and the Capitol. Though they have accepted to live in semi-harmony, they haven't actually accepted each other. They are still in very clear opposition, and this peace won't last. They are natural enemies. I mean, obviously we know the peace doesn't last. We know what happened 64 years later.
One of us has to die. They have to have their victor.
No. They don't. Why should they?
But could this opposition, this fight, already exist in this book? It also seems by the growing branch on the book that the population of Panem are slowly accepting the New World Order. But the fact that the branch isn't actually fully connected yet shows that the New World Order hasn't actually been set. Laws, traditions, and customs are still being created and implemented. There's a very delicate balance between the bird and the snake that could break it at any time. Literally the smallest trigger, the smallest misstep from one of these 2 animals could create a fight to the death.
And then in a fraction of time, the whole system collapses.
It must be a fragile system if it can be brought down by just a few berries.
Yes, it is indeed.
The balance these 2 animals need to maintain to survive together, the fragility of this balance will likely be the main plot point of this book. Or series. Yes, I know, everybody calm down. They haven't announced a series. They've only announced this one-off book. Except they've never once said it's a one-off book. To me, it really feels like this book could be the start of a trilogy. The fact that it was initially announced as an untitled Panem novel and not an untitled Hunger Games novel is very telling to me. We're not diving back into the Hunger Games story for just a little bit more, we're diving back into Panem, we're diving back into the universe. Panem is an extremely complex country, there's so much information to be told about it, and that's enough information to fill 3 books, perhaps? So, what if this was the start of a trilogy? What would the other books be called? What would they look like? Well, book 2 would likely be called something to the essence of survival of the fittest. Obviously, I'm sure Collins will find a much more poetic way of saying it. As I've said many times, songbirds and snakes are natural enemies that will fight to the death. So book 2 may have more about this fight between the rebels and the Capitol and the fact that it's a fight to the death. The cover of this book would therefore likely have the 2 animals turning on each other. The bird and the snake may already be actually inflicting damage on each other. It's possible that the branch at this point would now be closed, intertwining into itself to make a perfect ring. This would symbolize that people have accepted the New World Order, but aren't happy about it. The other branches that symbolized other options or other ways of life would also have disappeared on this cover. This means that the bird and the snake would be stuck on the one branch together in the one enclosed space. They would no longer be able to look away from each other and avoid each other, and they'd be forced to fight. The background of this book would likely still be green and black, representing the snake and the bird respectively. However, the green would probably be brighter and more prominent, showing that the snake is taking over. Much like how Mockingjay, the third book of the Hunger Games series, was named for the bird species, the third book of this potential trilogy would be named whatever species that snake is. I'm not good enough at snakes, I can't tell you what that is, it's a snake. That's all I know. The cover will have the snake as the victor in the battle between snake and bird. We know that the Capitol will win this fight because we know the bird comes back for revenge 64 years later.
What a lovely pin.
Thank you, it's from my district.
They must be very proud of you.
The branch will now be thicker and fully interlocked with no obvious beginning or end. It will already resemble the ring of gold that we know, showing that yes, indeed, this is the one way the world will go and there's no other options and no way of changing it. If my idea of the colours of the background is correct, this book would therefore be a fully bright green colour, showing that not only did the snake win, it's actually now thriving. But this bright green cover would also remind of the artificial brightness and colourfulness of the Capitol.
So now that you've seen them,
Do you like this title and cover, and what ideas do you have for this book? I'd love to hear what you have to say, so please tell me in the comment section down below. And until next time, happy bubbles! Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you to my Patreon bubblers for supporting the channel. If you want to see any of my other Hunger Games videos, you can click on the box on the left to watch the video of the predictions I made for this new book, or you can click on the box on the right to find out if District 13 had previous failed rebellions. Thank you for liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos.